Okay, we're back in front of a camera, in front of a whiteboard, because in today's video, I'm going to break down for you exactly how you can and how I was able to change my life in just 30 days time. And using my experience, the lessons that I learned, and some books that I've used to change my mindset, I'm going to break it right down into actionable steps so that from today, you can go ahead and make the changes required in order to go down the right path towards whatever life you want to build. So let me run down firstly my own personal story, and why I know this is something that you can do as well is because I started out no different to you. I had goals, dreams, desires, but I came out of school, came out of college without a clue about which direction I was going to go into. So I went into jobs, into 9 to 5 job, and working on building sites because I just needed to get some money and I didn't know what to do with my life and how I was going to get to my big goals. And there was a clear month that I can look back to a few years ago, probably March 2021, where I made a few huge changes to my life. Where at the start of the month, I was going complete down the wrong path. To the end of the month, where my life had changed, I had a business set up, I was able to start making money online. And yeah, just so much changes within such a short space of time. And I'm confident now that having done the research and changed my mindset and seen what's happened over the years, I know that there's a big shift that you can make in a short space of time that will change the rest of your life forever. So I want to break that right down for you. But the important thing from this video is that it's actually quite a different way of looking at things from the way that you're probably thinking at the moment. It's quite a different way of looking at things from the way that you're taught with the most common books that are recommended or the most common YouTube videos that might be suggested for you. There's a different way of looking at it, which means that you can come at things from a new angle from what you've probably seen before. So what I'll do, I'll break down these steps for you, break down the biggest shifts that you need to make, and then we'll talk about the actions that you can take towards the end of this video so you know exactly what to do to get started. Okay, so first step, the first thing we need to agree on is that in order for us to change our life, we first need to change our habits. And that's because your life is built up on the things that you repeatedly do every day. You've probably heard the Aristotle quote when he said that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, it is a habit. And that's because he realized, and you could see from people around him, no doubt, when he was doing this, that there was a clear difference between the people that say that they're going to succeed and the people that actually succeed are those that have made it a habit to take the actions required to get to the goals they want to do. Another reason I know that habit is so powerful is because we will do the majority of our lives on autopilot. Our brains will go through the different actions or the different thought patterns that we do every day without putting any energy towards it or as little as possible, because we are, as humans, we are designed to go through the path of least resistance, and our brains take up one of the most amount in terms of the different organs in your body. Our brain consumes the most amount of energy that our body out of all the organs in our body. And so for us to think of new things or think of a new way of doing something, it takes a lot of brain energy. And for our body to conserve energy, it would rather we do a lot of tasks on autopilot, and therefore we do a lot of our tasks based on the habits that we've got in place. So if you want to make sure that your brain is working for you, and what I'll say is if we want to make sure that our brain is working for us, then we need to understand that our brain is on autopilot. We have an autopilot brain. And so we need to make sure that that autopilot response is going to be responses that we want to do. Otherwise, if you have bad habits, then your brain will naturally pull you towards those bad habits instead, because it understands that whatever habits you have in place, your brain will go through that autopilot response to the different actions that you take. Now, this all comes from two huge books that were incredibly powerful for me in my life. It's James Clear and his book called Atomic Habits, and the other one was another book called The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg, which I have over on the bookshelf behind the camera there. And those two books taught me the importance of, if we want to achieve anything, it's not about the goals that we set, it's actually about the habits that we implement. And James Clear says, we don't rise to the level of our goals. Instead, we fall to the level of our systems. So whatever systems or habits you've got in place, that will be the level that you will achieve, because that's what we'll fall to naturally, because our brain on autopilot mode will fall to the level of our systems. We do not. rise to the level of our goals. The reason I know that to be true as well is because everyone sets goals. We've all, well, not everyone sets goals, but people in this space, people wanting to better themselves, it's easy to set a goal for yourself that you want to achieve. But why is it that not everyone achieves those goals? Yes, we can say goal setting is hugely important. Of course it is. It's important to know where you're going. And yes, it's important because everyone that has ever achieved anything has goals in place. But not everyone who has goals achieves their goals. And that's because just goal setting alone isn't enough. The only way we actually achieve those goals is by taking the actions that are required to get to those goals. And in order to take the actions required to get to our goals and to get to the success that we want, we have to take those actions repeatedly. And taking action repeatedly is a habit. So rather than thinking about goals, I think what a lot of people get wrong is that they set a goal and they believe that once you've got a goal, you will achieve it. We need to replace that with habits, first and foremost, because the habits are going to lead you to your goals rather than setting the goals themselves. So habits are going to be important. Now, how do we actually set a habit for ourselves? Well, there's a simple cycle that's talked about by Charles Duhigg in his book and also James Clear in a very similar way. But basically, all habits, we've all agreed that they are basically formed with a habit system. Okay? And a habit cycle. And this helps us understand how habits are formed. And so we know how to change our habits no matter what we're doing. So every habit comes around because of this cycle. A cue that causes our habit, a trigger initially. That then causes a reaction or a routine. And then the routine that we take, or the behavior that we take, which is the routine, will cause a reward. We'll have some sort of reward from taking that behavior. And then that will lead us back round to the cue for us to do that action again. And the cycle continues and continues. So this is applied to your bad habits or your good habits. And if you want to change your life in 30 days, we understand that habits are key. And so in order to change the habits to the healthy habits that we want to have, we need to understand this cycle because you can manipulate your habits once you understand how they work. So if your bad habit at the moment that's taking you away from changing your life is that you are often consuming short form content. So TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts. And if they're not serving you in any way, a good way of testing if they're not serving you is, can you remember the last short form video you watched? It's unlikely that you can. Then we need to understand that that's a habit that's taking us away from our goals and from the person that we want to be in order to achieve success. And therefore, we need to identify what is this cycle for the bad habit that we've got. So for our short form content addiction, so this is TikTok. If that is one of yours or whatever habit it is, think about what's the cue that causes you to do this. What's often a cue for these types of behaviors is boredom. You feel bored, not sure what to do. Maybe you're standing in a queue waiting for a coffee at a coffee shop. Maybe you're just bored at home and you're not sure what to do. Maybe you're trying to do a difficult piece of work and it's boring. You'll feel that sense of boredom, and that becomes a cue to make you think that you want to relieve that boredom. And so you'll then take a certain behavior that takes you away from that boredom. So the routine that you've got in place is that you'll have your short form addiction. You'll open up your phone, open up an app and start scrolling. And that's the routine. From this routine, it must give you a reward. And the reward for these types of activities is dopamine, which is the chemical that's released in our brain for pleasure. And so we feel that sense of dopamine release. We feel some sort of pleasurable response in our brain. And that gives us the reward that we're looking for, takes us out of boredom, and then the cycle can continue over and over again. And so if you want to change this, the way that we adapt our habits and the way that we improve our lives and become better people in a short space of time is that we look at the bad habits that we've got and we change just the routine parts of the habit. Now, in their books that we're talking about, Charles Duhigg makes the point that we can't actually delete or erase a habit. Once we've got a habit in place, we can't just delete it or erase it. It's built into our brains, and so we're always going to naturally have this habit built into us. So instead of deleting or erasing, we need to replace the habit, and we need to replace the bad behavior with a positive behavior that we want to take instead. But we can use the cues and the reward that we've already got set up in order to do that. So whenever you feel that cue of boredom, we're now going to choose consciously the new routine, the new behavior that we're going to take in order to get that dopamine release. And so we need to think of something that can easily come in and we trigger our minds consciously whenever we feel that sense of boredom. So now this comes into the part of thinking about, well, what is it that something would be a positive towards the goals that you've got? Perhaps you want to change your life, build a successful business. Perhaps you want to start going to the gym. Perhaps you want to be more healthy. Perhaps you want to quit smoking. All these bad habits, etc. What are the healthy behaviors that you know you'll need to take in order to achieve those results? Let's do one that I'm familiar with and from my own story. So from my story, when I was bored before, it would be short form addiction, or a few years ago, it was more so computer games, playing on Warzone, Call of Duty. And I would replace that boredom with, instead of doing Call of Duty, I'd replace it with reading self-help or entrepreneurship books, because I knew my goal was to build a successful business, to become an entrepreneur. And so the more understanding I had of improving myself and building a business as an entrepreneur, the more likely I was going to be to achieve my goal. So whenever I felt that boredom, because I was aware of this and I reminded myself of this frequently, I clicked into my mind that when I feel bored, I'm going to do something around self-help or entrepreneurship, and I'm going to move away from watching short-form content. I got the reward because I felt proud of myself, and reading these books gave me that immediate sense of dopamine, that hit of pleasure. And so that gave me the reward that meant that I would be able to do the same thing again, over and over again. So I just manipulated the habit that I already had in place to make it something that was healthy for you. Now, once you've got these healthy habits starting to come into place, and you've identified that for yourself, then that moves us on to the next stage in this process for how we can change our lives in a short space of time. And this step is all about how we make these habits stick. And it's something that's often overlooked when we think about the goals that we have or the habits that we want to take on. And that is your identity. So this is a key that I found to make sure that my habits were going to stick. Now, if I was not taking this seriously, I would just decide to tell people and to tell myself that now I'm starting to build a habit of reading self-help books whenever I feel bored. Okay? And that's probably what you'd say to yourself or to other people when you set this new habit for yourself. But what you actually need to do in order for it to last long term is to decide that it's your identity, is that you are somebody that reads self-help books whenever you feel bored, in order to develop yourself and develop your entrepreneurial skills to become a successful business owner. So it just needs to be an identity. You are the person that reads self-help books when you are bored, or whatever it is for you that you want to do as a habit. You need to start telling yourself and other people that you identify as somebody that reads self-help books when they're bored, or starts businesses when they're bored, or works on their business when they're bored, rather than somebody that works on and watches short-form content. When it's an identity, we have a strong desire in our brains to stay in line with the identity that we've built. Otherwise, you'll feel a sense of discomfort, like cognitive dissonance, if you don't feel like you're fulfilling the identity that you're building. So make it your identity. Say to yourself, I am, and fill in the blank about the identity that you want to build. And it must be the identity related to the habits that we're building. So I am somebody who reads self-help books when bored, or whatever habits that you want to build for yourself. It must become the identity. Now, another quick way to make this happen quickly, and so this was going back to my own story, the identity piece was a huge part. It was only the first part, but it was a big part, because I started to see myself as an entrepreneur, somebody that was building my own business, rather than somebody that was just thinking about doing it or trying to build it. You need to see yourself as that identity before it comes true. The next biggest part that I realize is huge to changing your habits is the environment that you put yourself in. Hopefully you can read this okay. Environment. So the environment. Now, a good story to illustrate how important environment is for you in changing your habits is the story of the US soldiers who were fighting in Vietnam. Now, there was a huge proportion of these US soldiers that actually became addicted to heroin while they were out there fighting for their country in Vietnam. And the US decided that they needed to track or do something about this, because they were worried that if all of these soldiers returned to the US, they'd all come back with this heroin addiction, and it'd be a disaster for the country when they received these soldiers back into the country. So they started to set up tests to make sure they could check how many people actually kept their heroin addiction when they came back home to the US. And staggeringly, it was only between 5 and 12% of soldiers who had a heroin addiction continued once they got back to the US. So out of all the people that were addicted, only 5 to 12% were carrying on being addicts when they came back to the US. And the reason for that, they realized, is that they had drastically changed their environment. And suddenly they were no longer around the cues or the triggers that were causing them to be heroin addicts while they were over there. So it's a very quick way for people to change the habits because they weren't around people or stressful situations that was causing them to take that negative action that they were while they're in Vietnam. So the way we can take this into our own lives is thinking about how can we change our environment so that we're not having the unhealthy cues constantly being put in front of us, and instead we're being put into a position where cues like are going to cause us to take naturally positive actions. Now, the way I did this was I got myself into a community because that changed my environment. It changed the people that I was with most commonly. And the best types of communities are when they have healthy habits, all the habits, the desired habits that you want to implement. The key here is that they're doing the habits that you desire, desired habits that you have. And it needs to be, in this new community, it needs to be completely normal for these people to be taking the actions that you are desiring to take as a habit. Because when you are part of a tribe, naturally our brains will want to be part of the tribe. We want to be accepted. We want to be like everyone else. And if it's normal to take the healthy habits, then we'll want to fit in with that. And we'll immediately jump on board with those habits because we just want to fit in. So you can use that brain the way that we're wired to our advantage if we do that. Okay, so environment, identity, seeing habits as the most important rather than goals is what we've covered so far. Now, to make this really relevant to you and the goals that you have, we need to take these learnings and we need to implement them with a couple of other books that I know are crucial on this subject about changing your life in just 30 days. And these are books that I read and they've completely transformed the way I look at life and success ever since. I can definitely say they're a big part of the reason I was able to change my life in a short space of time. And that first one is a book called Deep Work. It's by Cal Newport. And to summarize Deep Work, essentially, the book explains how crucial it is for us to be able to go deep into subjects and to be able to perform those subjects or those actions at an elite level, because it's becoming more and more rare in today's world for us to have a high level of skill in a small area. And because there's so many different distractions nowadays, so many of us are unable to really have deep levels of skills in a certain area because we're also scattered amongst lots of different things. And so the book says that it's crucial for us to spend as much time as we possibly can doing deep work, which Cal Newport defines as completely undistracted, focused work on single subjects rather than being pulled around in lots of different directions. So if you think about today's world, this is the earth, this is the red earth. Trust me when I say that with this drawing skills. What it's like in today's world is that we have lots of different options of things to be good at, and the world is pushing out lots of different messages to you in lots of different areas. And so you're being distracted. That's an email, that's a message from a friend, that is a different way of working that you've been introduced to. This is the old way, the old habits that you've got. This is a friend asking you to play a game. This is a new project that you've been set by your boss. And you're constantly being told to do different things in different areas. And so what happens when you have lots of different areas is that you can separate how good you are at each different thing. And so you give that maybe 16% of your time. That gets 10% of you. That gets 20% of you. That gets 25% of you, if I can draw correctly. And that gets what's ever left. And so each of these things, you can't expect to do any of them particularly well because they're only getting 20% of you, 25%, 10% of you, 16%. And every time you sit down to do each of these projects, you're not fully focused on each of those because you're constantly being distracted and pulled into different areas. And so the difference to this and the deep work way of looking at things is that we're going to choose one thing to focus on deeply, and we're going to give that thing 100% of our focus, 100% of our attention. We're going to put down distractions, make sure that we're not leaving brain power on the table when we get pulled in different directions, and just focus on one thing. And so when you've got these healthy habits, when you understand what type of business you want to build, when you understand what goals you have to achieve, then you learn the deep work system, and so you can then apply it to the business that you want to build. And that brings me to the final book that really helped me to change my life, and that is the book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. And this book was a game changer for me in order for me to really start to focus on what was important. So Gary Keller, in his book, he explains that too many of us are distracted doing lots of different things at one time, similar to the way that the book Deep Work explains it as well. And so the way that Gary Keller makes it very clear about what we need to do is we need to ask ourselves the question, what is the one thing that if we did and focus on solely, everything else would become easier and better? And there's something out there in your life, there's one goal that if you worked on and worked on towards it every single day would make everything else better and easier in your life. And so when you've got this one thing, it becomes a daily practice to do this one thing until you achieve success in this one area. And then you are on your way towards the goal that you've got, rather than being pulled in lots of different ways. So within your 30-day transformation that you're going to do, in the 30-day transformation that I had, it was important for me to identify what was going to be that one daily practice I was going to work on. For me, it was putting down the foundations for a business, and it was creating a successful e-commerce business. So that became the one thing, and everything else had to go out the window because that was my route. So as soon as you choose one route and go all in on that one, the faster you can get to results. So to summarize all of the books and the experiences that I've had, in order for you to change your life in 30 days, and the way I was able to do this was that I realized there was a 3-step method. First of all, it was choosing consciously that I needed to set up habits rather than goals, because my system was going to be the thing that was going to get me to my goal. The second step of this was to realize that I needed to start to apply the deep work principles to the new habits and the new work that I was going to be doing, so that I was completely undistracted and focused when I was working on my most important goal. And then finally, the deep work that you're going to be doing, it needs to be applied to the one thing that you have decided is going to make the rest of your life better and easier once you achieve. And I was going to put daily work and deep undistracted work towards this one thing. So I followed this, and I think you should do the same, because when you understand the habits you need to take and you commit it to habit rather than just doing it on the one-off occasion, when you do it in a deep work manner, when you're completely undistracted and you turn off the distractions, then you're able to apply that to the one thing that matters, that you've identified will make everything else in your life better. That's when you have a single focus to completely change your life in a small amount of time. So to take these actionable steps away from this video today, identify, work your way back. What is the one thing that if you achieved it, it would make the rest of your life better or easier? Then think about how can you regularly schedule deep work sessions within your day. And the recommendation is sort of between 2 and 3 hours. You can start with just 30 minutes a day when you get started. But when you've got time, when you get better at this practice, it's regularly putting this into your schedule, because not all tasks are created equal and not all ways of working are equal. There needs to be a deep work amount of time every day put towards that one thing. And then finally, to tie this all together, make it a habit. Start understanding that you need to have the deep work sessions on your one thing as a habit rather than something that requires willpower, because your willpower will drain like a battery, whereas habits will always carry on because your brain is in autopilot mode. So put these things into place, understand that this is all going to lead towards how you get to the goals that you want, and you'll be well away. Now, final thing to mention as we wrap up today is that the 2 ways that I mentioned before to really step into this is to understand your identity that you're going to build as somebody that achieves the one thing. So once you've got that one thing nailed, make sure that you are stepping into and embodying the identity of somebody that you want to get to. And the other point that we mentioned was that community is going to be the key to drastically change your environment and the people that you're around, so that you're constantly being reminded about the healthy habits that you want to take. So there's a community. The link in my description will take you into that. I've got a training on how to be focused and consistent, because ultimately it all comes down to focus and your ability to be consistent to achieve results. But I'd seriously consider getting around a new community, understanding the identity that you want to embody, because it's the person that you are that achieves the results, rather than you achieving the results with your current identity. So, hope you've enjoyed the video, hope you've taken something out of it today, and I hope you'll take action based off the back of this video. With that said, I'll catch you in the next one.